Hi, you're on the Retelling Films channel, and this is a retelling of the movie A Whole Life. A simple Alpine orphan becomes a cable car installer in the early 20th century. After losing his wife in a snow avalanche, he is sent out of longing to volunteer for the war. The movie begins with beautiful views of the Alpine mountains with a cart rolling along the roads. In it sits orphan boy Andreas Egger, who is being taken to a distant relative's farm. The grandmother invites him to the table with the other children, but the farmer tells him to sit separately, emphasizing that he is not related to them. After praying, the family begins to eat. Later, his grandmother puts him to sleep in the same bed as the children, but they chase him away in the middle of the night. Andreas is helping his grandmother bake pies when the farmer decides to punish him for breaking his pitchfork. The man beats the boy with a stick in the barn, becoming furious when he endures the beating without crying. Andreas does work on the farm, and his grandmother teaches him literacy in his spare time, but he is still not allowed at the dinner table. In one day, he fails to handle a heavy wheelbarrow of hay and drops it, which the farmer sees. Another session of punishment with a stick follows, for which the owner's daughter peeks, but suddenly the boy faints from the pain. The blow has broken his leg. The doctor called in puts a splint on it, but he doesn't care how it happened. Only the grandmother comforts Andreas, saying that the pain will pass like everything in life. So time passes. Andreas grows up working on a farm where only his grandmother treats him well. From a childhood trauma, he limps constantly. As it is the beginning of the 20th century, Austria is preparing for a world war, not yet realizing that it will be the first. The mood of the people is generally cheerful, but the farmer is unhappy that Andreas is being drafted into the army. He is short of laborers. Despite the young man's desire to change the rural life to cozy and quiet trenches, the farmer manages to negotiate that he would not be taken away. While working in the field, Andreas hears a woman screaming and runs to help. It turns out that the owner's daughter found her grandmother dead. She had passed away right in the kitchen. At the funeral, the young man says goodbye to her and afterward weeps in the field, having lost the only person who was kind to him. At the table during the dinner prayer, he defiantly throws his plate on the floor, to which the farmer calmly tells the young man to prepare for his punishment with a stick. But in the barn, he refuses to obediently endure the beating, threatening the farmer that he will kill him if he ever touches him again. Given that he is no longer a child, the farmer sadly realizes that the time when he could punish him is over and banishes his stepson. Andreas is hired as a laborer in the village to earn some money and then goes to the mountains. There he takes a job in a logging camp. Together with the crew, they fell trees and lower the logs down the paved path. When the work is done, he heads back to the village, but on the way he finds a lonely hut with a lamb mauled by wolves. Inside, Andreas finds an exhausted, sickly old shepherd man whom he drags on his back to the village. On the way, the old man tells him about death, which he calls a cold woman without face or voice, who takes people when they are not expecting it. Over these conversations, Andreas stumbles and rolls down a snow-covered slope. Slowing down, he sees that the old man has climbed down from his makeshift chair and fled deep into the woods to stay there forever. In the village, Andreas visits the inn where the maid Marie, for whom he has warm feelings, works. In his room, Andreas counts his savings, enough to rent his own secluded hut on the mountainside. There, accustomed to hard and laborious work, the young guy immediately starts to settle down. He puts up a fence and builds a vegetable garden. Soon, a new batch of workers arrives in the village. The authorities are planning to build a cable car to climb the mountain. This innovation will bring not only tourists and financial aid to the villagers, but also the arrival of progress, including electricity. Andreas stares at Marie from time to time, but does not dare to speak to her. Even the innkeeper advises him not to stare at the girl. But he catches her eye and dresses up on a Sunday afternoon to meet her near the church. Embarrassed, Andreas asks her out on a date, and soon shows her his plot, vegetable garden and house. The young man shares his plans for the future development of his dwelling, brags about his first house, but he says that he does not want to be a farmer and spend his life in the soil and manure. Instead, he goes to the construction workers digging at the foot of the mountains. However, in their camp, the manager notices Andreas's limp and says that he doesn't need such workers, but the guy persuades the manager and gets a new job. Together with the others, the guy has to put supports for a cable car and break rocks with a jackhammer. In his free time, Andreas spends with Marie admiring the scenery from the Alpine mountains and kissing in their background. A guy prepares to propose to her by discussing it with a co-worker. Together, they come up with a plan to make the proposal unforgettable. The colleague uses lights to write an inscription on the mountainside, which is perfectly visible in the evening darkness. After getting married, the couple officially move into Andreas' house. In order to provide for his family, the man applies to his bosses for a pay raise and receives it along with additional work. While laying a cable car, the crew gets hit by a tree piled by lumberjacks. One of the workers loses an arm. While the injured man is carried to the doctor, Andreas digs a hole to bury the limb. After a short while, the cable car is officially opened. The event is attended by a band, important guests and priests, commemorating the workers who died while laying the road, as well as sanctify the technical marvel. Those present throw their hats in the air for joy, after which the workers celebrate the occasion in the inn. The landlord shows Andreas and Marie another novelty of progress, an electric bulb that gives light. After the construction is completed, Andreas's life flows smoothly. He lives on a slope with Marie, planning to expand the vegetable garden. After a while, his wife informs him that she is pregnant. Then Andreas returns to the construction company, which is now laying a new cable car in a different location. In one winter night, a man hears a suspicious noise and goes outside to see what's wrong. It turns out to be an avalanche, a pile of snow crushing him and carrying him away. Andreas wakes up in the morning, nearly frozen in a snowdrift. His legs are broken, but that doesn't stop him. He crawls upstairs to the house to find out the bitter truth. He's still lucky. Marie is killed, buried under an avalanche along with the house. A grief-stricken Andreas tries to dig her up, but in vain. His strength is failing him. Marie's buried with the other villagers killed in the avalanche. The citizens express their condolences to Andreas while he looks at them with tear-wet eyes. After that, his comrades drag him to the inn, where he used to rent a room, where he has nowhere else to go. He spends his days lying in bed until his bones have healed enough for him to walk with crutches. Sitting outside, Andreas stares at the ill-fated mountain. Limping, he sets off up it to inspect the place where he was happy. Andreas goes to the office of the construction company to continue his work. The manager offers him a position as a repairman, maintaining the existing cable cars. The man returns to his brigade, where he nevertheless keeps himself separate from the rest of his colleagues. Andreas is engaged in cleaning ropes, being on the roof of a hoist cabin. Wandering along the road with his partner, he talks to him about death, and after a while, he is found frozen to death in the bathtub, which is the fate of everyone who discusses death with Andreas. After burying his last friend, Andreas continues to work on the maintenance of the cable car. One day, he hears tourists walking near the support tower. As they talk, they mention the name Marie, which awakens a memory in him. In the evening, he writes a letter to his late wife. When Andreas goes to the cemetery to check on his wife's grave, he sees that the village is decorated with German flags and that the Nazis have come to power. He continues to visit the grave from time to time, saying that there are no young people left in the village, all gone to war. Those who are left at home listen to the Führer's call on the radio to increase the working day for the sake of the war, which is gradually gaining momentum. Having lost all meaning in life, Andreas signs up as a volunteer. He is assigned to the Eastern Front. There he is assigned to mine mountain gorges in the Caucasus, to undermine them in case of retreat. He sits alone at his post, only occasionally watching a fellow minesweeper through binoculars and freezing at night from the unusual weather. But his superiors seem to have forgotten about him. When the supplies run out, Andreas leaves his post arbitrarily and goes in search of people. He stumbles upon a camp with a Nazi flag, but it has already been lowered. The Soviet soldiers chase the invaders away. Andreas is taken prisoner and sent to the camp, where he continues to write letters to his dead wife. 8 years later, in 1951, Andreas returns to the familiar Alps. The native village has become more modern over time. Cars and mopeds have appeared. The first thing he does is visit his wife's grave to throw all the letters he has written into the coffin through the slot, and there he is found by the innkeeper. He tells about the tourists who have occupied his usual room, but promises to think of something. Walking through familiar places, Andreas passes the farm where he lived as a child. His abusive stepfather sits in front of the entrance. He recognizes him, regretting that it was him and not his own sons who came back alive from the war. The farmer asks Andreas to beat him to death, but he does not care about the pathetic old man. he silently turns around and leaves. The man continues to work as a labourer for lack of alternatives, and the years fly by. Grey has silvered his hair, and wrinkles have cut his face. And now, Andreas is an old man himself, living in a wooden annex near the school. The voices of the children studying science come through the walls and disturb him. Andreas enters the classroom to ask them to be quiet, but only amuses the children and their teacher, Anna. Later, she visits the man, bringing him a pie. She takes a closer look at his dwelling, deciding that what's missing here is a steady feminine hand. Soon, Andreas and Anna go to the mountains on a cable car that the man helped build long ago. He shows her one of his favourite places, from where there is a beautiful view. After the walk, Anna invites him to her home for dinner. Cunningly lured by a delicious dinner, the teacher hints at a continuation by undressing in front of the man. But even lying next to her, Andreas thinks of Marie. He can't go through with the betrayal, so he gets up and leaves. Soon, the wooden school is about to be demolished in order to build something modern in its place. Andreas is forced to move out with all his meager possessions. He drags his belongings through the village, which is becoming more and more modern. Anna, who is leaving on the bus, gives the lonely old man a glance. In the spring, he moves into a hut carved into the rock like a cave. Andreas spends his loneliness writing letters to Marie, in which he expresses his thoughts and experiences. Every spring he goes to the cemetery to take the letters to the grave. With the rest of his fellow villagers, he watches the TV broadcast of Neil Armstrong's moon landing. One winter day, Andreas notices a crowd at a ski resort. They are looking at the frozen remains of some old man found in one of the deserted crevices. He recognizes the shepherd who ran away from him 40 years ago. The man attends his funeral, realizing that he is the last person who even knew him. Andreas notices that he has fallen completely behind the pace of life and modern progress. The village has changed beyond recognition, realizing that he has never seen anything but it in his life. Unless you count his military service. He gets on a bus and rides to the final stop, looking at the world outside the window, limited by the transport route. In the process, memories of a life lived, long but not that happy, come flooding back at him. Along with this chronology, tears come to his eyes. When he gets off at the terminus, Andreas fastens his buttons and walks slowly along the observation deck. He looks at the scenery spread out before him, almost the same as at home, but still different. Returning home, he writes another letter to his wife that he is not afraid of death and immediately falls dead face down on the table, imagining that he is lying on an alpine meadow and smiling looking up at the sky. Andreas is buried next to his wife, having uncovered a stash of letters that depict his entire life. And that's the movie ends. What do you think about this movie? Write your thoughts about the movie in the comments. If you liked my short retelling, then put likes and subscribe to not miss new videos. See you soon.